You're listening to Night Signals, and I'm your host, Cliff Reynolds, and it's just past midnight on the western edge of the world. The lights are low, the coffee's warm, and the frequencies are tuned to the strange, the speculative, and the stories that might just be real. Tonight, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had the feeling that your life, your path, your choices weren't really yours? Maybe it was subtle, a conversation that felt scripted, a stranger who knew your name, a decision that, no matter how you tried to avoid it, always seemed to circle back, like a track you were always meant to follow. Well, what if I told you there's something called the Human Rehearsal Program? What if I told you it's real and parts of it are being declassified? Not officially, of course, but by those who were involved and have nothing left to lose. I was recently contacted by someone who claims to have worked on the inside, not a whistleblower in the classic sense. This isn't Pentagon Papers or a top-secret memo. No, this is weirder. It's someone who says they were part of the design team, not military, not intelligence, something deeper, older, a private enterprise that didn't just study behavior, they engineered it. According to this source, the Human Rehearsal Program was, or still is, a decades-long psychological infrastructure experiment. The idea? To subtly script thousands, maybe millions of individual lives, to test influence, not by brute force, but by carefully inserted nudges, a parent's strange advice, a recurring song on the radio, a chance encounter that turns your whole world upside down. These weren't random, they were orchestrated, and for some of us, our entire life path may have been a dry run, a rehearsal before what? Well, that's what we're going to explore tonight. You'll hear a recording, unedited, from my anonymous contact, and later we'll open the lines. Some of you may have stories of your own. If what this person says is true, we've all been walking a stage we didn't know was built, and the play might not be over. Stay tuned. After the break, the first message from the insider. You're listening to Night Signals, and I'll be right here watching the red light flicker. Okay, we are back on Night Signal. I'm Cliff Reynolds. Now we are going to play our first audio recording. Here it is.
You don't know me, and I'm going to keep it that way. Not because I'm afraid, although maybe I should be, but because what I helped build, it only works when no one knows it's there. I used to be part of a group known only as Cluster Echo. No government insignia, no corporate nameplate, no records you'll ever find in a FOIA request. We were recruited from behavioral sciences, experimental linguistics, predictive modeling, academic stuff that doesn't make headlines, but together, we built something else, a system, a program. We called it rehearsal. Here's the premise. If you can shape a person's early inputs, songs, phrases, odd details repeated through their childhood, you can effectively nudge their decision tree. Not just once, but over a lifetime. We weren't talking about ads or media influence. This was deeper. Scripted events, planted influencers, pre-selected disruptions. Some people had fake neighbors. Some had therapists who were actually operatives. Some had lovers who were placed like chess pieces. And the test wasn't just about compliance. It was about reactions. We'd design a unique narrative lattice for each subject, a branching script of scenarios, relationships, tragedies, and breakthroughs. And we'd watch. Always watching. Not through surveillance gear, not usually. We built feedback loops into the subjects' lives, certain radio shows, certain pop culture fragments, and even random people humming the same song in different cities. If you ever thought you were being followed by a phrase, a word, a strange motif, you probably were, but not for the reason you think. We weren't testing for obedience. We were testing for resonance. We wanted to know, what triggers make you question your reality? Which subtle cues send you spiraling toward autonomy or break you into learned helplessness? You weren't a citizen. You weren't even a lab rat. You were a narrative variable, a subplot being tracked. And here's the worst part. Most of the people we monitored, they never knew. They went through their whole lives thinking fate or bad luck was steering the wheel. They thought they were free. They weren't, and I think I wasn't either. And even now, saying this, I wonder if I'm just playing out another layer of the script. A defection that was already baked into the model. You want proof? Start with the name rehearsal. It's not a code name, it's a function. Because the real thing hasn't happened yet. Everything we're living, is just a trial run. Ask yourself, why do certain people feel like background characters? Why do so many of us feel like we're waiting for something to start? That feeling isn't yours. It was placed there.
You're listening to Night Signals. If you're just joining us, you may want to sit down for this one. We just played a message from a man claiming to be part of a covert behavioral engineering program, one designed not to control your life, but to script it. A program that may have been influencing people since childhood, right down to the words they hear, the choices they make, the people they fall in love with. And now my inbox is lighting up. Phone lines are full. Messages from listeners who, well, I don't know what to say. Some of you have stories, some of you have memories, and some of you are just scared. Let me read you a few. These came in the last 8 minutes. Email 1, the box of scripts. Cliff, I swear I'm not making this up. When I was cleaning out my late father's garage in Vermont, I found a box labeled continuity. Inside were handwritten notes, dozens of them, describing my childhood in eerie detail, specific events, my first dog's name, even the time I broke my arm on a school trip. But here's the thing. The papers were dated 2 years before any of it happened, and they weren't written by my dad. I have no idea who they were written by. Lynn P. Montpellier, email 2, the red umbrella. Cliff, I've heard that caller's voice before. Not him exactly, but his words. I had a dream 6 years ago where someone whispered, "You're living the rehearsal, not the show." In the dream, I was walking in a city that didn't exist, but everyone was carrying red umbrellas. Since then, I've counted 11 different strangers carrying red umbrellas past my apartment on days it didn't rain. My friends say it's coincidence, but after tonight, I'm not so sure. Nathan K., Sacramento, email 3, the phrase. Every year on my birthday, someone says the same exact phrase to me. You're just where you're supposed to be. Different people, a waitress, a coworker. One time, a stranger on a hiking trail. I used to think it was just life being poetic. Now I wonder if I've ever had a single unscripted moment. No name, no city. Now, I'm going to say something I probably shouldn't have, but I've hosted Night Signals for 27 years. I've gotten weird calls, government threats, even one break-in. But this one is the first time I've had my own memories feel like they were written by someone else. There's a motel outside Spokane. I've only been there once. Middle of winter 2002, and I swear I remember the front desk clerk saying, "This room's for thinkers like you." I didn't think much of it until just now, because the man from segment 2, he signed his email to the ones who still think. We're not done yet. Coming up after the break, a second audio file. He calls it the branching scripts. And it might explain why some lives spiral, some stall, and some people just vanish. You're listening to Night Signals, and I hope you're awake. We're back on Night Signals. I'm your host, Cliff Reynolds, and here is the second message from the anonymous insider on the Human Rehearsal Program. This entry delves into how personal life paths were engineered, altered, and monitored in real time.
You think your life is a straight line. It's not. It's a set of branching scripts, each with a probability. And someone's been watching which ones you take. We built a tool called the Composer. It was a hybrid neural lattice, half machine learning, half human intuition. We'd feed it data. Your likes, dislikes, family history, school reports, online behavior, handwriting samples, speech cadence, even your dreams if we could get them. The Composer would render a probability lattice, dozens, sometimes hundreds, of possible paths, who you might date, who you might fight, where you might move, when you'd have your first breakdown, when you'd recover. Each potential timeline was scored in real time, not just for outcome, but for narrative fidelity. The goal wasn't control, it was believability. A life that felt real, even if it wasn't. The scripts were modular. We could insert fragments at will, a mentor who appears at just the right moment, a failure that forces a growth arc, a relocation that isolates you, so we could observe without interference. We even had what we called hard pivots, trauma points. Car accidents, job loss, divorce. They were introduced to see how resilient your constructed arc was. Some people responded exactly as predicted. Others diverged. And those divergences, they were flagged, not as threats, but as variables, narrative anomalies. Some of them disappeared. Some reappeared years later with different names. Some began remembering the scaffolding, seeing the actors, sensing the echo between one moment and the next. We called those people script-aware. They were rare, but they were dangerous. Not because they were violent, because they could no longer be influenced. And so we'd either reintegrate them using familiar faces, nostalgia cues, emotional anchors, or we'd extract them from public influence. There are entire facilities filled with people who think they had breakdowns. They didn't. They just woke up too soon. Here's something you can test for yourself. Look back at your life. Choose 3 turning points, moments that changed everything. Now ask, who was there? What phrase did they say? What song was playing? If more than one of those things repeats across events, you weren't deciding. You were being directed. And I know what you're thinking. Why? Because rehearsals aren't meant for the actors. They're meant for the audience, and someone is watching.
You're listening to Night Signals, and if you're just joining us, we've been following a thread so strange, so subtle. It almost feels like it's using our show as part of itself. We've now heard 2 recordings from an anonymous source, a former architect of something called the Human Rehearsal Program, a behavioral system designed to nudge, guide, and redirect the lives of unwitting people, maybe all of us, through modular scripts and subtle manipulation. And I'll tell you what's bothering me. It's not the idea of being watched. It's not even the possibility that we're living out a play written by someone else. It's the fact that it doesn't feel unfamiliar. There are gaps in my memory, sharp, surgically clean ones, right around important moments, moments where I thought I made the decision, but maybe the decision made me. Anyway, we've got someone online too. They called 10 minutes ago and wouldn't leave their name, but they said just 5 words. I broke my script once. Let's bring them on now.
Cliff, thank you for doing this. I didn't think I'd ever talk about it again, but I don't think I have long. So listen closely.
You've got my full attention. You said you broke your script?
I was part of the program, not staff, subject. I found out the hard way. Back in 2011, I started noticing things, little things, repeats. A woman in a blue scarf on 3 different flights, months apart. A certain song on the radio every time I almost changed my life. Like something didn't want me to.
That sounds like what our previous messages described. What happened?
I started resisting, just little deviations. Take a different street, cancel a date. Say no to a job offer that made no sense. But the world pushed back. Hard. It didn't like deviation. I had what they'd probably call a narrative collapse. My friends started acting strange, like they were stalling for time. They repeated phrases. They forgot things they should have known. One of them called me by someone else's name, a name I only used online.
You think they were planted?
Yes, or repurposed. I got out, sort of. Vanished for 2 years. Went fully analog. No phone, no email, no cards. And during that time, I started dreaming differently. No ads. No brands, just raw images, mountains, wires, water. I think it was the first time I saw outside the script. But they caught up to me, they always do. And now I'm back. Mostly.
What do you mean, mostly?
I think this call might be part of the script now, too. That's how deep it goes. Even rebellion is rehearsed.
I don't know what to say. I don't know what to believe. But if you're out there and you've noticed these echoes in your own life, keep listening. We've got more. After the break, the Insider's third and final recording, he calls it the curtain call. And it might explain what this was all preparing us for. You're listening to Night Signals. I'm Cliff Reynolds, and we'll be right back. And unless this was already rehearsed, we are back on Night Signals. Stay awake. Cliff Reynolds. Here is the third and final message from the Insider on the Human Rehearsal Program. In this recording, he reveals the suspected endgame of the experiment.
This is the last message I'll send. I'm already noticing alterations in my environment. People smiling too long, traffic lights blinking wrong. I know the cues, they've tagged me again. You need to understand what this was all for. It wasn't about creating perfect citizens. It wasn't about selling products. It wasn't even about surveillance, at least not in the traditional sense. The Human Rehearsal Program was built to simulate culture itself, to model human society not from the outside, but from the inside out, using real lives as live data sequences. Every emotional beat, every failure, every heartbreak, it was all fed into the spectral model, a vast behavioral engine located somewhere, underground we think. No confirmed location. Rumors place it near the Nevada test site. Others think it moves. This engine used us, our lives, to train something. Not a product, not a policy, a response. They were running dry-run simulations of humanity's reaction to an unspecified future event. A war, a disclosure, a planetary reset. They wanted to know, what would billions of human minds do if they all reached the same realization at the same time? So they rehearsed it, over and over. In our lives, in our patterns, not one world. Thousands of tiny nested worlds within us. The test wasn't about what we'd do. It was about whether we could stay intact under the weight of truth. Some of you were conditioned for collapse. Some for surrender. Some of you were left wild, random controls, and some of you were being trained to become the anchors, the ones who hold the rest together. You'll know if that's you. You've always felt like you were carrying something that didn't belong to you. A weight, a memory, a tone in the back of your skull. That's the load code, the narrative seed. You've been preparing for a revelation you haven't seen yet. But soon, the script ends and something else begins. We don't know what it is. We weren't cleared for that. We just built the stage. You'll hear the signal. Not in a voice, not in a broadcast, but in a pause. A global moment of hesitation, like the world forgetting its next line. When that happens, you'll have a choice, to speak the truth, or stay in the story. The curtain is already moving. I hope you're ready for your line.
There are nights on this show where I wonder if we've gone too far, but then something like this comes along, and I wonder if we haven't gone far enough. That was the third and final recording from our anonymous contact. I don't know who he was. I don't know if he's still alive, but I believe him because if I close my eyes right now, I can feel that weight, that pause, like something's waiting for me to speak my part. After the break, calls from listeners, those who feel they were part of the program, those who remember things they were never told, and maybe someone out there who remembers writing the script. This is Night Signals. I'm Cliff Reynolds, and we've still got time. Welcome back to Night Signals. If you've been with us since the start of the program, you've heard the framework of something staggering, something intimate and terrifying all at once. The Human Rehearsal Program, as our anonymous source described it, was not a tool of surveillance. It was a stage, one where real people were given roles, scripts, and turning points they never chose. And now the phones are ringing in waves, voices from every corner of the country, people who have begun to remember. Let's go to line 4.
Cliff, I haven't told anyone this. I've carried it for over 20 years. When I was little, maybe 7 or 8, I'd wake up hearing my mom talking in her sleep. Always the same line, over and over. She must choose the orange path. We thought it was just a weird dream loop or maybe some anxiety, but she said it every few months for years. My dad ignored it. I wrote it down in my journal because it scared me, like it meant something.
And did it ever come up again?
Yes. On my 12th birthday, my aunt, my mom's sister, gave me a birthday card. No message. Just a painting of an orange dirt road curving into the woods. That's it. I asked her what it meant, and she just said, "That's what they told me to send." I laughed thinking she meant my parents. But now, I don't think she did. Fast forward 10 years, I ended up studying environmental design, completely random. I failed out twice, but I stuck with it. The first job I got was with a trail restoration nonprofit. Our first project? Painting orange trail markers on paths that hadn't been used in decades. I remember standing on one trail with a bucket of orange paint and thinking, I've been here before, but I hadn't. Not in this life.
That's the thing about rehearsals, isn't it? You don't know you're part of one until someone hands you your line. Let's go to line 2.
When I was 15, Cliff, I got arrested. Dumb kid stuff. Shoplifting from a gas station. But something strange happened when I was getting processed. The cop leaned in and whispered, "Oh, good, we needed you to break something." Then he winked. Next day, I got an acceptance letter from a high school across the state. I never applied. It was a private academy, full ride, tuition, housing, everything. My parents thought it was a miracle. But I remember standing at the front gate thinking, why me? Why now? The letter had no contact information, no signature, just one sentence. Narrative reset successful. I didn't understand it back then, but tonight, I think they wanted me to break the law, to force a shift in direction. And I've never quite shaken the feeling that my life since then hasn't belonged to me.
Some stories you hear, and they feel like fiction. Others land somewhere deeper, like a forgotten memory resurfacing, tugging at something just beneath waking life. I want to read you an email that just came in. The address no longer exists. The server bounced the return, but the message remained. Subject, the pattern beneath. Cliff, I started mapping out the locations where I've had déjà vu. Real déjà vu, where I not only recognized the moment, but could feel the next few seconds before they happened. Red pins for major events, blue for minor flickers. Over time, I started seeing shapes form. They weren't random. The pins curved, aligned, and linked in impossible symmetry. When I stepped back, I saw glyphs, geometric shapes with no known language. Some looked like constellations, others like mechanical symbols. I connected them with thread just out of curiosity. A few weeks later, I passed out. No warning, just lights out. In the dream, I was in a giant room, like a hall of mirrors, but instead of reflections, there were other people, each one working on a map like mine. We didn't speak, but we knew we were doing the same thing. When I woke up, all my red pins were gone. Only the blue ones remained. The pattern was still there, but it had changed, as if someone edited my memories while I slept. I now keep the thread pattern locked away, but I still feel it hum when I'm near certain intersections, like a power line under the sidewalk. Maybe I wasn't mapping places. Maybe I was mapping nodes in the program. That's the kind of message that doesn't just stay in your inbox. It follows you. It waits behind familiar places. It watches you at stoplights. Let's go to another caller from Virginia.
I worked in audio post-production for years, Cliff. Mostly commercial, some public service announcements. One day, our studio received a project from a group called Low Deck Systems. No website, no return address. Payment in untraceable crypto. We were told to layer hundreds of microclips, half-second snippets into background tracks. Not speech, not music, just oddities, whispers, pings. Soft male voices saying things like, "You're safe here," and "choose yes." We were told it was for subliminal marketing research, but when I listened alone one night with headphones, I heard my own name, twice. A month ago, I was at the hospital visiting a friend. Her heart monitor beeped steadily, but one time, it beeped in the same rhythm as one of those clips. 3 short tones, 1 long pause. It wasn't random. It wasn't medical. It was a code. I think we were embedding triggers into people's subconscious, songs, media, even medical devices. And I think I helped script the cues without knowing what they were for.
Tonight I feel like a man reading a playbill in the dark. Not sure if I'm watching the show or part of the act. I've been sitting in this studio for decades, reading letters, taking calls, but this is different. We've been circling something too large to name, too delicate to grasp. But the shape is becoming clear, a program, a stage, and maybe a countdown. I want to close this hour with one final letter. This wasn't an email. It was hand-delivered to the studio 2 nights ago. No name, no return address. Postmark stamped, stage door. The letter, handwritten, Cliff. You were never meant to see the full script, but you were always meant to speak it. You are not the actor. You are not the audience. You are the microphone. You broadcast the signal, not for them, not for us, but for those who will inherit this version of the world. Keep transmitting, even when the script goes silent, especially then, because silence is the final cue. The next version will only begin after the static from the one who watches you sleep. That is the letter. And maybe I have been watched. Maybe we all have, but tonight I'm not afraid of that, because if we're living in a rehearsal, then maybe, just maybe, we still have time to choose the final line. You've been listening to Night Signals. I'm Cliff Reynolds, and if you remember nothing else tonight, remember this: the curtain is moving. You're still with us, and if you are, then something in this story has held you here. Maybe it's curiosity, maybe it's dread, or maybe it's the feeling that what we're describing isn't just fiction, it's familiar. We've heard from insiders, from listeners, from people beginning to remember, but not everyone agrees. About 20 minutes ago, I received a message. Unlike anything else tonight, no subject line, no name, just a digital signature I've never seen before. V0_ID/RE/0000/STATIC. I'm going to read it in full because I think it was meant to be heard. But as I read it, listen closely. See if it convinces you. Or if, like me, you sense something underneath the surface. Email, there is no program. Mr. Reynolds, what you are describing, this so-called human rehearsal program, is a compelling fiction. I understand the need for myth in a chaotic world. You and your audience are not under observation. You are not being manipulated. You are simply products of probability and pattern recognition, nothing more. Human beings are creatures of repetition. Your memories are unreliable. Your narratives constructed after the fact. A woman remembers a phrase from her mother's sleep. A man receives a scholarship after an arrest. These are coincidences, unremarkable when viewed statistically. The illusion of control, Mr. Reynolds, is not imposed by an outside force. It is generated internally by your brain's need for order. That's all your broadcast is, a pattern-making exercise, a mirror for frightened people seeking cause in a causeless world. And now you've built a stage around that mirror, one where the audience plays the actors and convinces themselves they've broken through. But let me be clear, there is no program. There is no composer, no rehearsal, no scripted anomalies. And your source, the insider, is no insider at all. He's someone who got too deep into his own mythology, a man swallowed by metaphors. Do not amplify delusions. They are infectious. Your listeners will begin to see patterns where none exist. They will begin to reshape their histories, to believe they are part of something larger, when in fact they are simply alone and subject to random circumstance. That is the truth you're trying to escape. I urge you, do not read this message aloud. The damage is already forming. The repetition is beginning. There is no program. There is no program. There is no program. Sincerely redacted. That's how it ends. 3 sentences repeated. No name, no reply address, no metadata. It showed up in my inbox, then disappeared 5 minutes later. I only read it because I copied it first. South, is this a rational skeptic, a concerned listener, a damage control agent, or is this part of the script? Because here's the thing, if you wanted to make someone believe the Human Rehearsal Program wasn't real, you wouldn't ignore it. You'd write that email, FOAM-controlled, dismissive, laced with fear disguised as logic, and you'd tell me not to read it, which is exactly why I did. After the break, more from you, more from the ones who won't forget, more from those who may have been watching all along. You're listening to Night Signals, and if the script is cracking, you might hear the static. You're listening to Night Signals, and it's just past 3 a.m. At this hour, something strange happens. The noise dies down and the calls slow. And for a few minutes, the world gives you space to think. And that's what I want to do now. No emails, no recordings, just me here trying to understand what we've just experienced together. Because the thing is, this isn't just a story anymore. It's become a mirror. And we're all seeing different versions of ourselves reflected back. We started tonight with a message, an anonymous voice claiming he helped design a global behavioral experiment. The Human Rehearsal Program, a stage built around our lives. Scripts written for us before we even knew we had choices. He said our lives weren't controlled exactly, but nudged, shaped by subtle interventions, phrases, symbols, music, strangers with familiar eyes. He described a composer, a system that tracked our decisions, not to change them outright, but to watch which version of us emerged, which of us questioned the play, which of us accepted our lines. Then we heard from you, people across the country, some laughing nervously, others terrified, stories of red umbrellas, of repeated phrases, of arrest records followed by strange scholarships, of maps made of déjà vu, forming symbols that defy reason. And then came that rebuttal, the email that told us not to worry, that we were making it all up, that none of it was real, that we are alone and meaningless and random. But here's what bothers me, folks. That rebuttal, it didn't sound like a scientist or a concerned skeptic. It sounded like someone desperate to get us back into our seats before the curtain fell. And so now I'm left sitting here in the half light, surrounded by static, trying to figure out what the truth actually is. Is the Human Rehearsal Program real, or are we inventing patterns in a world that offers none? And then I think, maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe the truth isn't binary. Maybe it's layered. Let me try to explain what I mean. There's a theory in cognitive science called narrative scaffolding. The idea is that our brains don't process life as raw data. They build stories. They take our memories and edit them so they make emotional sense. We all do it every day. So what happens if someone out there learned how to hijack that mechanism, not to brainwash us, but to redirect the scaffolding as it's being built, to insert one sentence, one phrase, one small emotionally resonant detail at just the right moment? And what if they did that over the course of a lifetime? Would you even know? Would you believe it was fate, serendipity, the universe speaking? Because here's the most terrifying part of all this. You might still be you. You might still feel real, but you'd be walking a path built by someone else. And if that's true, if any of that's true, then the Human Rehearsal Program doesn't have to be a facility or a satellite or a machine humming beneath the Nevada desert. It could be an idea, an invisible layer of narrative infrastructure, a logic that was inserted into reality decades ago, something we inherited, not something we chose. And maybe this show, this very broadcast, is part of it. Maybe I'm meant to say this. Maybe you're meant to hear it. Maybe all of this is just Act 3. But then again, maybe not. Maybe this is the glitch. The improvisation. The moment the actor forgets his line and speaks from the heart. So here's what I believe tonight. I believe the world is more curated than we want to admit. I believe patterns exist and some of them are placed. I believe some people remember things they shouldn't, and some forget things they were never supposed to notice. And I believe that if even one part of the Human Rehearsal Program is true, we owe it to ourselves to look for the others. Because if this is a rehearsal, then what's coming next is the performance. And I don't want to miss my cue. After the break, one last story from a man who claims he met someone who admitted to being a scriptwriter. I'm Cliff Reynolds, and this is Night Signals. And stay tuned. You're listening to Night Signals, and we're entering the final stretch of tonight's broadcast. It's been a long night. One of questions, echoes, patterns, and distortions. And if you're still listening, I suspect you feel something shifting, like we've passed the point where this was just a theory. What we're doing now feels like excavation, like we're brushing the dust off something ancient and deliberate. Earlier this evening, I received a letter that chilled me to the bone, not because of what it said exactly, but because of how casually it said it. The author claims he met a man who worked, not behind the scenes of government or media, but behind your life. A scriptwriter. I'll read the letter in full. You decide for yourself. Letter, the man at table 6. Cliff. I'm writing this from a bus terminal in western Montana. I've been on the road for 6 months now. I used to be an adjunct professor of developmental psychology in upstate New York. That life is over now, and it ended because of something a man told me over lunch. It was a Thursday, cold. I stopped at a roadside diner between Syracuse and Rochester. Only 2 other people were inside. One was the waitress. The other was a man in a gray coat sitting in a booth against the far wall, table 6. When I sat down, he looked at me once, nodded politely, and went back to scribbling in a small leather notebook. I wouldn't have thought anything of it, except when my coffee arrived, I saw the same phrase written on the sugar packet 3 times. You're right on time. I didn't order coffee. I asked for tea. The man in the gray coat looked up and smiled like he had been waiting for me to notice. Then, without prompting, he said, "Some people perform their way through life, Professor. You're one of the few that reads the script while it's still being written." I asked him what he meant. He invited me to sit at his booth. His name, he said, didn't matter. But his job title, Narrative Coordinator, Revision Team Delta, he claimed to have written thousands of life events. Some minor, some monumental, first loves, sudden relocations, a parent's illness that appears just in time to halt someone's rise to fame. He called them calibrated disruptions. I asked him how that was even possible. He said most people's lives are made of porous material, soft timelines that absorb edits easily. The trick, he said, is to insert unresisted emotional catalysts. You don't force someone into a new life. You give them a perfectly timed tragedy or gift or memory, and they'll do the rest. He spoke in metaphors, said we're all characters with incomplete arcs waiting for resolution, and that the world needs narrative density, that without story, the human mind collapses into disassociation. Then he said something I'll never forget. I don't write for people, Professor. I write around them. The story needs to keep going even if the actor forgets their line. He showed me his notebook, names, cities, moments. One page had a name I recognized, mine.star. It was underlined, with a note beside it, trigger event, isolated realization, diner booth, winter. When I looked up, he was gone. I left my job the next week. I tried to write it off as coincidence, but everywhere I go now, I feel like someone is turning a page just ahead of me. If what he said was true, then this isn't just a rehearsal. It's a scripted improvisation, and we're never meant to see the outline. But Cliff, some of us are starting to. J.R., formerly of New York. That's how the letter ends. No address, no phone number, just a final note scribbled on the back of the envelope. Don't wait for the next line. Say something that was never written. And maybe that's what we've been doing tonight. Maybe every word of this broadcast was predicted, or maybe this is the first real improvisation some of us have ever done. After the break, one final message from me, a reflection, a question, and a moment of stillness before the red light fades. This is Night Signals. I'm Cliff Reynolds, and if you're still listening, maybe you were meant to. We've reached the end of tonight's broadcast, and it feels different, like we've crossed some unseen threshold. The world on this side of the transmission somehow doesn't match the one we started in. I keep asking myself if we did something tonight. If by saying these words out loud, reading these messages, airing these calls, we pulled at a thread that wasn't supposed to move. And if we did, I'm not sure it can be wound back up again. You've heard stories tonight, some impossible, some oddly familiar, a program that may or may not exist, scripts that may have guided your steps long before you knew you were walking them, events that felt random but now seem curated, encounters you once called coincidence that might have been chapters. You heard from a supposed architect of it all. You heard a rebuttal that tried a little too hard. You heard memories that matched across strangers, maps made of déjà vu, and a man who said he met the one who wrote his moment before it happened. And through all of it, I've asked myself, is it real? Is there a hidden structure under all of this? Or are we spinning in a storm of patterns trying to turn chaos into meaning? Maybe that's what humans do. Maybe that's all we've ever done. But then again, maybe the pattern is real. Maybe the feeling that we're being watched is more than paranoia. Maybe the sense of repetition, the dreams that echo, the conversations you swear you've already had. Maybe that's residual script dust clinging to the edges of your consciousness like stage lights behind your eyelids. Here's what I know. Something in you responds to this, not with certainty, but with recognition. And maybe that's all we need to know, that the truth is not in the theory, it's in the resonance. If this is a rehearsal, then we're being trained for something. If it's a performance, then we're mid-act. And if it's just chaos dressed in costume, well, then maybe we find meaning in choosing our own lines. Tonight, I read from a script I did not write, but every word felt like it came from me. So as the red light fades, I'll leave you with this. If you find yourself in a moment that feels familiar, a street corner, a phrase, a stranger's glance, pause. Don't run from it and lean into it. And say something the program didn't expect, even if it's just, I know, because that might be the one unscripted moment that rewrites the entire scene. I'm Cliff Reynolds. This is Night Signals. And if you remember nothing else from tonight, remember this. The silence between signals, it's never really silent. Good night.